welcome to the Natalie dress, just right there. So we've got quite a few different methods for this dress, which is why I've made 5 different videos for you, so you can see every dress in detail. So the first thing you're going to do probably is print off your pattern, and attached to your age 2 to 3 you find instructions. So what you get is instructions for obviously the sizing and all that boring stuff, and then you get 1, 2, 3, 4 different dresses. You have written instructions for all 3 of these. So as you go on, you've got the one with the polka dots here, so that's 2 pages, and the various links that go with it, and then you've got the yellow one here, and again the various links that go with it, and finally you've got the big pink and rosy print dress as well. When you get your pattern, it looks something like this. So you've got a lay plan and you've got your individual pattern pieces like this. And because I don't do multi-size patterns, I don't think they are really that practical, especially if you want to make more than one dress in different sizes. So I have a file per size. So you get 5 files when you buy a pattern from age 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. First of all, you need to have your printer setting on actual size and borderless to make sure that the whole pattern prints off and nothing's cut off. Then you want to test the scale, which should measure 5 centimeters exactly. You have the option of doing a shoulder strap like you can see here, then you cut along the solid line, or you can use some bias binding and then you would cut out the pattern piece with a dashed line. Assembling a Frocks and Frolics pattern is really easy. All you have to do is put A onto B, covering up the attachment line, and then you put the next slot on depending on what size you're doing. The larger sizes will have 4 pieces, the smaller sizes just have 2, and you got a complete pattern piece. Now you can see here on the skirt that they're actually exactly the same. The only difference is, of course, that we're going to cut an opening slit into the back. And I've got 2 different types of pockets here. I've got a heart one and I've got the Megan one, which is quite easy to make. So choose which one you want and print that one off. And you've also got different sash sizes. So you've got a really wide sash and a slim sash. So you need to make sure you then cut out the one you want, and I wouldn't even bother cutting out the one you don't want, just in case you get confused. And then you've got a pattern for your tie back. And when you see these arrows, it means you need to extend it to the width that it says here, like 80 centimeters. I didn't want to waste more paper because it's a rectangle, it's fairly easy. Finally, you've got a pattern piece for your different bows that you can use with this. When you've got the sign here where an arrow goes in, out, that means you have to cut it on the fold. You get some hearts if you want to do applique hearts, obviously. You get the shoulder strap, which you can cut straight or across, depends on your design. You get the bodice fastening, which is cut on the fold, so it's basically a long strip. We're now going to look at the different methods that you can use to make this dress, and I've just spread out here all the things that I've used in mine. I like using ribbon simply because when you put a ribbon on the outside of a dress, the beauty of it is if you don't have an overlocker, that you can get a super clean inside. And the way you do that is, instead of putting the right sides together so that you have the seam on the inside, you put the wrong sides together. The seam goes to the outside and you just put a ribbon over the top. Here you can see the hem trim, that is the long pattern piece. This dress has the armhole bound with bias binding and it's just knotted at the top. And for all of the dresses, as a fastening, I've used, let's show you a different one, my little Dritz poppers, which are these babies here. The Dritz poppers, they work with 4 parts. You need 2 of these and 1 of these each, and then they're just put in. Well, you can watch the video on how that goes. So I really like them. I use the baby Ver, that's at Joann's. You can get those in America, and you can also get them from snaply.com if you are in Europe, which is quite good. And the method I've used for this is to run 1 strip all the way along, which is what is generally done in industry. And on this particular dress, for example, instead of using the triple hem, I've put on some rickrack on the bottom. And I did a special video with this dress actually because someone put a comment on and they said they really liked the close-up that I did, the really super close-ups. So what I did was I just showed you on here how I put it together, and then you have super close-ups for all the rest of it, which I think is really great. On this last dress I did, which is like a bonus really, I've used bias binding for the pocket. It's the Megan pocket, just made slightly different. You can watch the video to see that. And I've put a little bit of a bow on, which is made from bias binding with a button on top, which is really, really cute. Big button on the front. And I've also used bias binding here for the top. Swiftly moving on to the dress that I think is just so cute. This has got really slender tie backs, and I think that's very nice for the summer. And in the front you get this technique whereby you've just got the sash inserted into the seam here, and then I've put in some lace, which I also think is really nice, into the shoulder straps. And finally I've got this option for you. When you're using many layers of fabric and the sash is fairly big, you can't really do that with a French seam like you can on this little dress. This is French seamed because it's fairly light and it's okay. So the heavier it gets, the more likely you are for it to look really bulky. So what you want to do is use bias binding instead. When you're ready to cut out, you look at your layout plan, and it's not always the best way of cutting it. For example, I've done this here on purpose. I've got a fabric which is wider than the one 13 centimeters, so much more economical piece of fabric, and of course I get more out. So you can see that my selvages don't meet in the middle, but they're further over. So I've swapped my pieces around a bit, but basically you want to put your front and your back on the fold on the side. Doesn't matter which way they run. They could be turned over and run the same direction. If you have a directional fabric, like a print, like on the mushroom dress where the skirt has to go one way, you have to be careful. So put it in one direction, but with a polka dot it doesn't matter. You've got the skirt bodice closure, which needs to be cut on the fold, so you can move that over here as well. I've got the front once, and I've got the back, which you cut twice in this fabric. Now I could actually cut these two bits in exactly the same fabric again, right through the center here. Okay, so we're just cutting out the top part, which is the shell. And I've got my strap here, which I can cut twice. Then these bits here you will have to cut again. So if I just put this to the side, and the heart of course I'll have to do again as well. So we want to cut this on the forward again, and the back twice again, the tie backs, the slim front, and the hem trim. So if I take these off first of all, and I do the usual story that I tend to do, and I do it just to the length that I need. Okay, so I don't like waste, and fabric is expensive. If I want this to be 60 centimeters, need to be 30 either side, right? So I need to go to about 30 centimeters here. It's all right for my tie backs. You can make them longer, of course, if you want. Right, I'll leave them at that. So I want to cut two of these here along that end. So all I have to do is cut those out. I'm just going to put on my hem trim as well, once and twice. And I can put my slim front sash on there as well, and then I've got all the rest left here for those two bits. I'm going to cut out my tie backs to there, turn it over, and now I need the hem trims. What you can obviously do is, if you've already got it on the forward, you can do this, okay, and cut this again. Just put it straight on the edge there, cut it again. I wouldn't actually recommend that you do this without pinning, unless you are quite an experienced sewer, right? So cut through the middle. Okay, and I've got my 2 hem trims done and dusted too. And then I cut my front, and I cut 2 of the backs. There you go, and don't forget that if you want to bind it with bias binding, you would cut along that line. So I've got my 2 here, so basically I've now cut everything that needs to be cut in the contrast apart from a couple more of these heart shapes. So I plonk those on as well and cut around those. And that concludes the cutting out. You would then be ready to go. Thanks very much for watching.